Yo, yo, yo! I'm here with the Mali Melee. I'm gonna go over each match. I guess every match I'm just gonna make a separate video, that way I can kind of go over the teams, go over my thoughts about the match, kind of space it out a little bit instead of having a whole movie of the grand finals. So this tournament happened April 17th to April 19th, 2021. Pema had just kind of come into the meta, into the game about a week before, I believe. So it was very fresh, a lot of cool teams, decent turnout, a lot of good players. So the grand finals were against Minimal and WebBowser, both fantastic players. I've had the privilege of playing on the ladder against them, winning, losing both against both of them. So I really look forward to kind of walking through these matches with you, and well, let's get into it. So right here we've got Minimal's teams, Sayla captain, Eric captain, and Anora captain. Very offensive, tempo-driven captain team choice here by Minimal. I like the overall kind of setup here. Probably relies on just putting on a ton of offensive pressure and breaking the opponent's teams in this conquest format. So the Sayla captain has Fury Pendant for extra damage. I like that on a Sayla captain team just because you get that extra healing from the captain plan, which means you're allowed to use that Fury Pendant a little more aggressively. You don't have to protect Sayla quite as much because you can easily flourish in like a Flicker Glove for the heal. Looks like Minimal chooses to use a Round End on Sayla, able to tank some tricks like Lunch Invite and then Round End the Hunger away and get the healing as well. Zale and Grace here, very good core of emotional attacks, mostly with Vivid Peck lowering the emotional defense, and Grace being able to take advantage of that with Unbutton. Kind of cover each other's weaknesses pretty effectively. Zale having high digital and relatively good emotional defense, Grace having really good physical and emotional defense, kind of lacking in the digital defense. So Ribbon Twirl is interesting on Grace. I do kind of like that. Allows, first of all, it makes the opponent dizzy, which means they can't parry, and also makes them a little bit slower with their priority. So Jane can get off attacks more easily, Sayla can get off claymores before they can hit her. Jane looks like in this team is just a Pema soak, kind of gives that defensive backbone with rebuild and being able to flourish bypass claws for a full heal. And then Gloam Glocket Eric, if I had to guess, Minimal will use this to kind of lead off, get some charge of fireworks, and pop off from there, allowing you to flourish more often. I like bypass claws on Eric here, for sure, instead of something like Blaze of Glory. Just gives him a little bit more options. Minimal's Eric team, another Gloam Locket Eric with Burn Bright. That's really interesting. Allows Eric to turn one flourish Burn Bright, live with Gloam Locket against most fighters, and then either rebuild or fireworks, or even just switch out to something like Jane or Lise. I like the overall pop-ups clear options on all these teams. Got Disrupt Wave Eric, Disrupt Wave Eric. We have Tidy on Lise here. So Minimal definitely taking into account all the cherry upgrades and all the and Pema being in the format now with pop-ups as well. Seems like Minimal is a fan of Fleeting Locket as well on Grace and Clint. Fleeting Locket Grace in general being kind of a theme, except for this Anora team. Anora team's a cool pick. You don't see it too often. That captain plan gives you more charge when you flourish. Very powerful on Yasmin. So overall, Grace very popular on Minimal's teams. Eric very popular on Minimal's teams. I think he's got a good setup here. Alright, now let's hop over into WebBowser's team setup. I see a Grace Captain, which gives you a lot of battery gain when you switch. I see Eric Captain, which everyone knows gives you battery gain when Eric comes in. I see Jane Captain, gives you a decoy whenever you parry. So all of these teams kind of reliant on meter gain for that charge and being able to use it effectively. The Grace team looks like a more defensive Grace team with that Molly, with that Tazu, with the Jane, and of course Lise. I see pop-ups on both Jane and Tazu, so it looks like this Grace team, WebBowser's going to rely on it being able to switch in and give that defensive pressure, maybe get a pop-ups or two off. Pop-ups on Grace team is very effective. I remember going up against WebBowser a couple times before the tournament. He was able to switch around, get that charge through the captain plan, and just flourish pop-ups very, very easily. Tidy on Lise, I imagine, because you don't want to get rid of your own pop-ups that you set up, so Tidy over Disruption Wave. Molly and Jane covering each other's weaknesses. Same with Grace and Tazu covering each other's weaknesses while also having fairly good attacking stats as well. So I do like this Grace team. I actually look forward to testing this out on my own. The Eric team looks like a fairly standard Eric team, though Odette is a little bit interesting. Compersionate Odette is very fun against something like the Eric mirror match. Though in Conquest format, you're not always guaranteed to know what they're going to be up against, so a little bit harder to predict, but Odette always good with Pester Bomb against more defensive threats, being able to put on some pressure with Topple Hammer. Ribbon Twirl on this team, I guess it gives Jane's easier way to attack and stops them from parrying. So, interesting choice there on Ribbon Twirl. I look forward to seeing if WebBowser gets to make use of that. This Jane team, though, looks very, very effective. Pema with Jane Captain, being able to threaten, I guess anytime Good Muscles Pema is behind a decoy, the opponent's very scared. Flicker Glove giving some needed priority to help protect the threats against Wendell. I'm sure if you've seen other videos on my channel, you know I like Wendell on Jane Captain. Let's see, Cherry, most likely with decoy and pop-ups, like a lead. If you're able to get that decoy up with proxy, you can double Fashion Advice or double pop-ups. Once Cherry goes down, though, yeah, I guess I like it. It's kind of like a suicide lead on this team. Gives you some pressure with pop-ups, gets rid of items with the Fashion Advice. Shielded Kaiban is annoying on Jane Captain teams. You're able to parry, get a decoy, it doesn't burn your battery, so you're able to get extra decoys. And then you can just sit behind the decoy and charge panel, kind of get that battery back very easily. Kaiban. I like the back pocket locket on Kaiban. He knows that Kaiban's going to be sticking around more often. He's going to need to throw out more than 4 admires, most likely. And so the back pocket locket gives you basically 8 admires. So overall, I guess I'd call this more of a well-balanced team setup. You have a kind of a bulky offense, or more of a bulky defensive kind of, still offensive but more bulky Grace team. You have Jane offense team, and then Eric is definitely more of a tempo offensive team. So I look forward to seeing how these teams go up against each other and how Minimal and WebBowser face off against each other in the grand finals. Let's jump into the match. Game 1. Minimal versus WebBowser. Alright, Minimal is starting to lead with a Sayla team. Sayla's captain plan, deal or heal 50 HP on using a flourish, and WebBowser's Grace captain plan, give some charge whenever they switch out. So I expect a lot of tempo switches from WebBowser to kind of keep up that offensive pressure and that momentum while getting charged at the same time, and I expect Minimal to be able to kind of heal himself out of tricky situations. Minimal chooses to lead with Zale up against WebBowser's Molly. Zale obviously threatens immediately with the Peck to lower Molly's emotional defense, her highest stat, down 8 stages. Which is what Minimal chooses to do. Molly eats it and replies with a lunch invite. Ooh, but a nice bomb locket on Zale means that lunch invite was kind of a wasted turn. So Minimal Zale threatens with a big shriek now that Molly's emotional defense has been chewed away. Kind of expect WebBowser to just take it again and then get that second lunch invite to start putting a clock on Zale's HP. Zale is now hungry, it's starting to tick up. WebBowser gets a little bit of health from the Lucky Pendant. Looks like Minimal is considering maybe a switch here. And also anticipating WebBowser to switch out as well. He knows that if Molly stays in, Shriek will make short work of it. And just considering a Peck maybe to hit the Lease or the Grace that might switch in. Tazu would also be a valid switch. All those fighters have pretty good emotional defense. Looks like Minimal predicts the switch. Takes some biting damage, but nails Grace with another Peck, dropping her emotional defense down. Another tick of hunger on Minimal Zale. Zale's definitely on the back foot now. Grace has the initiative advantage and also offensive pressure from Escape Whip. Even on Battery, mostly because of that switch into Grace, even after 2 turns of using a trick with Molly. That's kind of the power, I think, of Grace Captain. You're able to spend a couple turns using a trick and still get that charge. Another switch from WebBowser brings him to full battery, brings in Tazu, most likely anticipating Minimal's switch out. I'd say WebBowser's now in a good position. Isn't too afraid of a physical attack from Grace. Grace didn't quite have the offensive pressure to force out Tazu. Tazu's safe to either use pop-ups, maybe a digital attack for Firewall. Alright, Flourish pop-ups from WebBowser. Full stack on Minimal's side. That's a lot of pressure. Zale has 10 HP left, will die to hunger at the end of this turn. Looks like Minimal is just trying to maximize the meter gain on this turn. Expects to outspeed Tazu. Smart switch by WebBowser. Able to eat pretty much any attack from Minimal and also get the charge from the Captain plan. I like that play. Now Minimal has a full battery. Looks like his pop-ups clear is Eric on this team with Disruption Wave, considering bringing him in. I do like that play, especially with the battery. Can eat the pop-ups damage, get rid of them, potentially force out Molly. But Minimal chooses Grace for the extra biting damage, biting chip I should say. Forces Molly out with a riding crop most likely. Though WebBowser might consider just sacking Molly here. That's what he does. Loses Molly to the unbutton. Grace will get a speed boost. I like that play by Minimal just to put some initiative boost onto Grace for free. Having set that up earlier with the Peck from Zale. WebBowser brings in Tazu. Again, Tazu puts a lot of pressure on Grace. Minimal considering maybe a ribbon twirl. Minimal doesn't have a ton of great switches into Tazu here. Goes for the Flourish Ribbon Twirl, which applies it both dizzy and locked. The WebBowser counters with a Firewall, knocking out Grace. So Tazu's trapped, Tazu is dizzy, and so will not be able to attack before Sayla. Which means Minimal's pretty free to go for the knockout with Claymore here. It's a pretty free turn. Takes the backlash damage. Minimal now already down to 75 heart after, or 65 heart after the Fury Pendant, plus backlash, plus pop-ups. Those Flourish pop-ups already doing work this game from WebBowser. So WebBowser has Lise, Jane, Grace left. Jane is probably the safest switch into Sayla, having the really high physical defense and Sayla only having physical attacks, which basically forces out Sayla here. So Jane is free to either hand cannon or bypass claws, has a full battery to take advantage of. WebBowser might consider a flourished hand cannon just to boost Jane's digital attack. Minimal, not quite sure who to bring in here. Jane is a great defensive switch in to other Jane, but doesn't really do much in return. A flourished hand cannon from WebBowser's Jane will boost Jane's digital attack up to 216. Yeah, like I said, Jane really not a great offensive, doesn't put much pressure onto opposing Jane unless you're able to boost her stats somehow. Minimal goes for the chip with hand cannon. WebBowser replies with his own boosted hand cannon. One more will take the knockout on Minimal's Jane. Minimal does have a healing move here. Though it looks like WebBowser has the tiebreaker token, and so most likely will not be able to use it. So I think we're going to see a Jane sack here from Minimal. Alright. Jane goes down on Minimal's side, and WebBowser's Jane is almost back up to full after all the healing from its lucky pendant. Eric's pretty much the only safe switch in here, though Eric doesn't do a ton against Jane either. Looks like Minimal lost his only answers to Jane, that being Grace and Zale. So it's going to be a tough one to come back from for Minimal. Disruption Wave at least gets rid of the pop-ups on Minimal's side if he chooses to use that move, which he does. Looks like he's going to flourish it, get rid of Jane's stat boosts with the SAD status effect. Heal, back up, which puts him in the Gloam Locket range. Cool play by Minimal. Taking advantage of that Sayla captain to activate Gloam Locket again and get that SAD status onto WebBowser's Jane. Though from here, really the best play from Minimal's side is the fireworks for the battery. She chooses to do for 29 damage, gets the flashy charge. WebBowser's Jane replies back with a bypass clause for the knockout. That lucky pendant putting in work on WebBowser's Jane. Slowly healing her HP back up. This is going to be a tough one to come back for, Minimal. Sayla does not do much against Jane. Even with the SAD, lowering or ignoring the stat boost that Jane got previously. I'm not sure how Sayla can come out of this one. Noble goes for the flourish round end, just get a little bit extra healing. Forces both fighters out. Sayla's weakest defense stat, being digital, means both Lise and Jane are pretty strong against Sayla. WebBowser chooses to bring in Grace, probably for the biting damage chip. Also understands that with Grace's naturally high physical defense plus the focus that WebBowser put into her physical defense means Sayla's not doing much to her either. I think a lullaby here onto minimal Sayla is going to seal the deal. 40 damage every time Sayla attacks is pretty tough to come back from, especially after round end, having both uses eaten by Jane's acidic armor. Jane just getting some more chip damage. Claymore from Sayla. Fury Pendant brings her to 40, and then the Tired will self-knock out Sayla, which means the first game goes to WebBowser. Good game. So that was a really nice match. WebBowser definitely showing the power of Grace Captain with those switches, giving both that defensive pressure, but also being able to charge the battery like that. At the beginning of the game, Tazu was able to use pop-ups, Molly was able to use lunch invite, all these tricks that don't normally give you charge, and then switch out and get the same charge and keep up the battery war, I guess, with Sayla, with minimal Sayla. I think if I had to pinpoint when Minimal kind of lost the game here was when he lost Grace, because that was really his only final answer against WebBowser's Jane. Once Grace went down, it was just Minimal's Jane, Sayla, and Eric, which really have a hard time breaking high HP Jane. So Grace kind of staying in against Tazu, that firewall. I understood a little bit why Minimal went for the ribbon twirl there, but I think couldn't afford to lose that unbutton, that digital attack, or that emotional attack that would be able to counter Jane. But overall, good games. Can't wait to see round 2.